Welcome to Mondays on the Mount. This is episode number 7, and it is February 28th, 2022. In ancient times, salt was an essential element to survival. In fact, one article in Time magazine credits salt with the development of human civilization. Who would have guessed that something we take totally for granted could be something so important? Let's look at 4 uses of salt. First, salt makes food tasty. This one's easy. Without salt, our food tastes bland. Salt is a part of just about any recipe that you can think of, and that's because it makes things taste better. But more specifically, when used correctly, one chef mentioned that salt brings out the true character of what it's seasoning. In other words, adding salt allows us to fully appreciate what it is that we are enjoying. Second, salt preserves and purifies. Before refrigeration was invented, salt was added to meat to keep it from rotting. On a long journey, you would depend on salted meat to stay alive. Salt also served as an antiseptic treatment before modern antibiotics were invented. Number 3, salt is a holder of value. Did you know that the term salary comes from the word salt? In fact, salary comes from the Latin word salarium, which means salary, and it has the root sal, or salt. In ancient Rome, a salary meant the amount of money that was allotted to a Roman soldier to buy salt, which was an essential but expensive material. That's where the term worth his salt comes from. Fourth, salt is essential to covenant. The first time we see the word salt appear in scripture is Leviticus chapter 2, verse 13. Now, the context of this passage is about the grain offering, which is said to have salt added to it. Leviticus 2:13 says, "Season all of your grain offerings with salt to remind you of God's eternal covenant. Never forget to add salt to your grain offerings." The second time we see salt used in the terms of covenant is found in Numbers 18:19. It's also in the context of offerings. In Numbers 18, the Lord tells Moses to instruct Aaron and the Levites that it's their responsibility to take care of the tabernacle. This was their allotment, as they were not going to receive any inheritance in the land, because God was their inheritance. All of the offerings, except the burnt offerings, belonged to them. God was letting them know that He Himself was going to provide for them through the offerings of His people. In the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus addresses His followers. He tells them that they are the salt of the earth. Now, what does He mean by this? Now, frankly, He might have a number of things in mind, but let me just make one observation. That is that salt is essential. Without salt in our diet, our bodies would be starved for nutrients. Without salt, food would be bland and it would spoil quickly. Without salt, in ancient times at least, trade and commerce would have been impossible. Without salt, wounds would have become infected. And most importantly, without salt, God says that we would forget God's eternal covenant that He has made with His people. So Jesus tells us that we are salt, and therefore He reminds us that we must be salty. If we don't live out our purpose of being salt to the world, frankly, what good is it to anyone? Jesus says that bad salt will be thrown out and trampled upon by men, because that was the only thing you could do with bad salt. In fact, salt, if it's thrown out, rather than being used properly, can be really harmful. It can foul water supplies, and it even can kill vegetation. And I think the same is true with Christians, which is why Jesus reminds us all to be salt. All right, friends, now let us turn our attention back to our Bible memorization. I'm so grateful for those of you who have taken up the challenge to memorize the Sermon on the Mount with us this year. And seeing the multitudes, He went up on the mountain and He sat down. And His disciples came to Him, and He opened His mouth and He began to teach them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall obtain mercy. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are you when people revile you and persecute you and say all kinds of evil against you falsely for my sake. Rejoice and be exceedingly glad, for great is your reward in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets before you. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its flavor, how then can it be seasoned? It is good for nothing except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot by men. Thanks for tuning in, and we will see you next Monday.